this is going to be a slightly smaller little Christmas tree than the one I made the other day, and this one I'm going to use a different type of spruce. It's a spruce called strobus. So strobus is kind of, I always think, a really tactile type of conifer, and it's one that I really like. I always think it's quite, makes me want to stroke it. And when you have it outside in your door wreaths and things like that, the frost just glistens on it beautifully. So remember from the other day, you are cutting into sizes. So you've got little ones, medium sized ones. This is such a pretty conifer as well. And how it's gonna, honestly, I challenge you, I bet if any of you make it out of this, you'll just want to stroke your little Christmas tree all the time, because it really is the most tactile material, and reminds me of those old-fashioned, I don't know if you remember, shag pile carpets. That's what it reminds me. So this, when I make it, it's going to be a really sort of slender tree, a nice and a narrow little tree. But I'm after all of my trees I'm going to put on the windowsill. I really want them all to be made of different materials, so that they have they all stand out and they're all unique, they're all individuals. Because I think that about trees, a bit like people. Trees are all unique. Each tree has its own centre, its own roots, its own story. It's seen different things, whether it's had a very long life or a short life. It's had a different experience than the tree next to it, and it always makes me think that that's why we're drawn to trees. I have a beautiful photograph of my lovely friend Shannon hugging a tree, a great big ancient redwood, thousands of years old, and think of all the history that tree's seen, and it just kind of makes me feel very small and very insignificant in this life. So here we go. So I'll have to cut some more in a minute, but for now I'm going to start off with the long pieces around the bottom. So attaching to my mossed cane. So remember what I told you before, it's really important that the you do it really tightly, because particularly with these, and pack it really close together, because more with this than with anything else, these are going to shrink, and these are quite important things to remember. So when you take them inside and you've got central heating and things like that, they're going to shrink. So when they shrink, potentially they could fall apart. So pack them really tightly, pull your bobbin wire really tightly, and then put the next one in. And I'm really feeding them in really close to each other. And I'm also acknowledging that these have a little bend on them. So this is kind of bending this way, so I'm putting it in that way, so that when I push it onto the terracotta pot afterwards, all of the branches are going the same way. That is, unless they move, and of course that's another thing about trees, they move. Not like Lord of the Rings moving, but I mean they do, they move. So just think, as you're putting things in, think about where they're going, and think about how the finished effect is. Sometimes when you're arranging flowers, you're thinking about what's happening there and then, but not thinking about how it's going to look as a whole. And it's quite easy to forget the whole picture. So we need to always cut away from yourself. And sometimes you're trying to get into a stem that it's dead easy to forget and cut towards yourself, but obviously this is a big error, because you can hurt yourself. So if you can imagine these long pine needles, a bit like one of those like ribbony type dresses that they have on Strictly, that's kind of what you're making in effect here. So consider that, and think about how it's going to move. But you can see it now, how much it's bending. So that's what I'm talking about. When you put them in that way, so that bend's going to go that way. I feel like I'm racing against the clock, but it's only because of the light. It's just disappearing before my very eyes. In the end, you'll barely be able to see me. All right. Okay, so these gorgeous pieces now. Let's get these in. And then we're going to start going higher up the stem. So this thing of packing them tightly though, I can't describe to you how important that is, because that really is deal breaking. And the smell is just gorgeous, absolutely beautiful. And I challenge you not to feel the therapeutic benefits of doing this. Honestly, you're just going to be so happy when you're making it. And again, remembering that natural bend as they furl outwards. So you're using all of the things that nature gives you to create your design. You're not messing with it too much. You're just using what's naturally there. And every time I'm putting something in, I'm going just a little bit higher, just a little bit taller. Just further up the stem of my tree. My beautiful, slender, elegant tree. I noticed my daughter does a lot of yoga, a lot more yoga than I do, and her piece that she did last night was so beautiful, and it was all about growing. And I could see with her movements that it was like flowers opening and like trees sort of striving towards the sun. And in a way, that's what we all try and do. I think that's why this time of year is so tricky. Yesterday, I think it was yesterday, the day before, these things that require you to be generous. They require you to be generous with your time, require you to be generous with the materials and be patient. You know, you build these things correctly and beautifully, and they're going to last all the way through Christmas. You do them sort of half-heartedly, and they're going to pack it all in before we've even got to the big day. So think as you're doing it, think, you know, have I put enough in? Is it packed tightly enough? Have I pulled tightly enough? Have I put enough effort in? And much like a lot of things that we do, the more you put in, the more you'll get out. Look at that, it's so beautiful. So keep going, keep attaching. I don't want to see, kind of, if you think of the masters, like in the wire, as you kind of underwear or foundation wear. You don't want to see it, you know. You feel better knowing it's there. You don't want to see it. So keep going. Oops. The trials and tribulations of working on a garden table with holes in it. Half the stuff's on the floor. And now getting to the end with my little tiny pieces. I'm just going to put a little tiny finish of moss so you can't see my wire workings. Not too much, just a little tiny bit. It's just really to seal it. So you can't see any wire. Tissue. So much better than the sleeve of my jumper. And then got a little pot. Gonna put a bit of moss in there. It's got some oasis in. It's lined. The oasis is 1,000,000% soaked. So that's just giving it weight, really. Nothing more exciting than that. And then I'm gonna find my end piece. I'm gonna just give it a little bit of a shake out. My beautiful slender tree. I hope you enjoyed that. I've got 2 trees now and the little forest is beginning to take shape. We only needed 2.